I will never forget the look in my children's eyes the afternoon the guard pressed that folded paper into my hand. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a sentence, a suspension notice. My family, banned from the community pool for the entire summer. My daughter Emma's eyes filled instantly with tears, her cheeks trembling as she whispered, "But why, Dad? What did we do?" My boys, Jason and Liam, seemed carved into stone, stuck in place by disbelief. They weren't angry yet, just confused, unable to understand how laughter, splashes, and being kids had become crimes. And behind us, there she was, HOA President Anna Lynch, draped in her crisp resort robe, sunglasses flashing in the sun, head thrown back in laughter as her friends hauled floaties, inflatable flamingos, bags of snacks, and portable speakers straight into our pool. The same floaties and toys she had demanded be banned for children. The same splashes she punished my family for, now made by grown adults drunk on her favoritism. It was in that moment I realized it wasn't about safety. It wasn't about rules. This wasn't about maintaining a standard of fairness. This was about Anna's hunger for control, her obsession with dominance. It was power for the sake of power, and humiliation for the fun of it. She was savoring every second of my children's heartbreak. But here's the thing about me. My name is Nolan Owen. I don't scare easy. And I don't back down when someone comes swinging at my family. For 2 decades I've worked in construction. I know that when a door slams in your face, you don't stand there pleading. You build a new one. If a gate locks you out, you don't beg for the key. You build another entrance. So if the HOA thought barring me from their little kingdom would end me, they were about to see a man willing to dig deeper, pour concrete, set rebar, and create something bigger, stronger, better than they ever dreamed. And what happened next? It didn't just shake Anna's smug throne. It turned the entire neighborhood upside down. Before I take you there, do me a favor. Drop a comment. Tell me your city. Tell me the time. Let me know where and when you're listening from, because this story deserves to be shared across every street in America. This isn't just about pools. This is about standing up to those who think power means they can trample anyone beneath them. When we first bought our house in Maplewood Heights, I thought I'd found paradise tucked into a neat suburban bow. Streets lined with lawns trimmed like green velvet. Sidewalks wet with morning sprinkler mist, catching the sunrise in a glitter of droplets. Kids riding bikes, basketball hoops hammered in driveways, neighbors waving with practiced small-town charm. And right in the middle, like a shining centerpiece designed to sell the dream, an Olympic-sized community pool. That pool was the heart of the neighborhood. It was the reason my wife Mia and I swallowed the cough of $420 in monthly HOA fees. It hurt. That money could have gone to vacations, better storage, a new truck. But the thought of our kids, Jason at 12, Emma at 9, and little Liam at 7, running down with towels flapping and laughter echoing, that was worth it. We paid the fees. We believed the sales pitch, because that pool was supposed to be where childhood memories were made. At first, the dream held true. Summers meant I'd drag myself home after a long day at the construction site, boots heavy with dust, sweat burned into my shirt, body aching, and I wouldn't even get one foot in the door before the kids swarmed. "Dad, let's go swim." They'd already be packing bags of towels and pool noodles alongside Mia, who prepared snacks, water bottles, and sunscreen with a smile that told me family time was about to heal the exhaustion from my day. Those warm evenings were magic. Steam rising from the water under dim lamplight, Marco Polo echoing across the lanes, belly flop contests while parents chuckled beneath umbrellas. Jason soon joined the swim team, cutting through the water like he belonged there since birth. Emma and Liam's confidence blossomed as they splashed and practiced strokes. Neighbors who once felt like strangers became familiar faces, waving across the courtyard, shouting encouragement as our kids learned. Maplewood Heights wasn't just where we lived. It was home, and all of it worked because of one man, George Matthews. The HOA president when we moved in, George was a former teacher, kind-hearted, the sort who carried laugh lines around his eyes and a whistle around his neck that he almost never used. He believed in children, understood the pool wasn't just chlorinated water but a place where families built roots together. His philosophy was simple. These amenities weren't about control, they were about joy. Under George's care, disputes were rare, rules were reasonable, and no family felt unwanted. Then George retired, said he and his wife were moving to Arizona for sun, golf, and grandkids. If I'd understood what would happen next, I would have sprinted to every neighbor with a clipboard in hand, begging them to come out for the special election. But life was busy. I was buried in deadlines, hammer in one hand and paperwork in the other. Mia juggled school runs, sports practices, obligations stacked like bricks. We trusted the neighborhood to pick someone fair, Another family-centered leader who would walk in George's shoes. We were wrong. Because that's how Anna Lynch slid in. On paper, she looked impressive. Late 50s. Hair clipped into a silver bob so sharp it could cut glass. Pantsuit starched crisp. And a resume full of corporate compliance jobs no one truly understood. She lived in one of the grandest homes. Alone, corner lot, perfect hedges. Unlike George, she didn't laugh. At her first meeting, she walked in carrying a 3-inch binder labeled Operational Improvements and declared, without hesitation, "This community has been running without structure. That changes now." And change under her came like a tidal wave. The pool, once the beating heart of our summers, was shackled under red tape chains. She carved out adult swim hours dead in the middle of the day. 10 to noon, 4 to 6. The hours children needed relief from the searing sun. The hours parents hoped for laughter. She banned pool noodles, flotational toys, inflatables, anything kids truly found fun. She stripped sound from happiness, posting signs that read "Quiet voices only." And then the test. Oh, that test. No child under 16 allowed unless they passed Anna's personal exam. Not a certified lifeguard test. Not Red Cross, Anna's test. Judged solely on her gaze, her stopwatch, her opinion. She turned herself into judge, jury, and executioner of pool access. At first, I tried brushing it off. Maybe she was high-strung. Maybe she'd ease up. But Memorial Day smashed that hope. Emma splashed playfully into the pool, a perfectly normal 9-year-old cannonball. And within seconds, a whistle. Not from a lifeguard, but from Anna. Emma was scolded and banned for splashing. My son Jason stayed 2 minutes too long after swim practice. Straying into the first seconds of her so-called adult swim hour, we got a violation notice in the mail, plastered with a $50 fine. I paid it, but my patience was thinning like a crack in drywall. By June, she had turned cruelty into sport. Emma laughed at Liam's silly face. Just a giggle, light and ordinary. And Anna's watchdog Elaine stormed across the pool deck, clipboard in hand, demanding we leave for excessive noise. My daughter's laughter labeled a crime. That night at dinner, Emma looked down at her plate and whispered, "Why doesn't Mrs. Lynch like us?" The silence around that table was thicker than concrete, and that's when I saw it clearly. Anna was not policing rules. Anna was savoring power. She enjoyed stomping joy out of children like she stomped ants on her sidewalk. So, I rallied. I built a petition, 15 families adding signatures, weary of her tyranny. We presented it at the HOA meeting, voices shaking but united. I slammed it down on the table. We all pay the same dues. The pool is for families. For everyone. Anna flipped the folder closed with a snap, looked over her glasses, and smirked. The rules were properly approved by the board. If your children can't behave in a shared space, perhaps you'd be happier installing your own pool. Her sycophants laughed, clapping. Our petition was struck down 4 to 3. Then came the blow that carved the line in stone. One sweltering Saturday, 95 degrees cooking the pavement. We had just arrived, towels rolled, sunscreen in packs. And Anna herself marched up with a guard at her side. She handed me a suspension notice, 3 violations. Jason's extra minutes, Emma's laugh, Liam's floating lesson. Proof, she said, of ongoing disregard. Our access revoked. Entire family suspended. Summer privileges terminated. I stared at her in shock while she grinned, daring me to argue. The guard shifted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, but still stood beside her like muscle. I gathered our towels while my children's eyes burned tears. We left well behind us. Anna's clique strutted in with toys, speakers, floaties in neon colors, filling the pool with every joy she had stolen from kids. Adults splashing in laughter while children sat banished. That was it. That was the walk that set my rage in concrete. Because if Anna wanted to call herself queen of the pool, fine. But it was time someone built a new kingdom. That night, I sat at my desk under one lamp's dim glow, staring at the crisp HOA letterhead clutched in my hand. The violation notice Anna had shoved there. Edges sharp, ink neat, like a brand pressed into my family's skin. It didn't just read ban, it read like a mockery, like she had stamped powerless across my name. And as I sat there, sleepless, ideas rising like rebar out of fresh concrete, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't finished. Because if she thought barring my family solved the problem, she had no clue what was coming. The night after that humiliating walk home from the pool, I didn't sleep a wink. I sat at my desk staring at the violation notice Anna Lynch had shoved into my hands. The HOA's letterhead, crisp and official, almost mocked me from the page. Suspension of pool privileges. repeated violations, unsafe conduct. My jaw tightened as I read it for the 10th time. Unsafe conduct. My 12-year-old son helping his little brother float on his back was now considered dangerous. No, this wasn't about safety. It was about control. And Anna Lynch was enjoying every ounce of the power she thought she wielded. I opened the thick HOA binder we'd received when we moved into Maplewood Heights. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. CCNRs were supposed to outline community rules, a roadmap for harmony. What I found instead was a tangled mess of vague language that Anna had twisted to her advantage. Buried in the fine print was a section on amenity regulation authority. It allowed the board to establish policies, but clearly stated they must be applied fairly and without discrimination. I couldn't help but smirk. If this ever reached a courtroom, Anna would be the one squirming, not me. But lawsuits take time, months, sometimes years. And my kids didn't have months they had this summer. I needed something faster. The next step was organizing. I wasn't the only one fuming. That very week, I knocked on doors, clipboard in hand, gathering stories from other families. Carlos Rodriguez, a father of 2, told me his daughter had been scolded for using a pool noodle during non-toy hours. She'd come home in tears, asking if she had done something wrong. Maria Chen shared how she tried to speak up at a board meeting, pointing out that the new restrictions contradicted the HOA's original amenities agreement, but Anna cut her microphone mid-sentence. It was the same story everywhere. Families humiliated kids treated like intruders in their own neighborhood. We formed a coalition, 30 families in total. We decided to petition formally demanding the rollback of Anna's rules. At the next HOA meeting, I was prepared. I wore my work boots and hard hat. A little theatrical, maybe. But I wanted to remind them I wasn't just some dad whining about pool toys. I was a builder, a man who dealt with concrete facts and hard structures. I stood at the podium, petition in hand, my voice steady but firm. These signatures, I said, holding the papers high, represent families who pay the same fees as everyone else. Families who deserve equal access to the amenities our money maintains. These rules are unfair, selectively enforced, and in violation of the HOA's own bylaws. This isn't about order, it's about exclusion. I looked directly at Anna as I said that last word. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When it came time to vote, the room split like oil and water. Parents and family sat tense and hopeful while Anna's loyalists, mostly older residents without children, clapped in support of her every word. The final tally, 4 against 3 in favor. Our motion failed. After the meeting, as families filed out, Anna intercepted me at the doorway. "You seem to have a lot of energy, Mr. Owen," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe you should consider channeling it into something more productive than stirring up drama." I clenched my jaw, but forced a smile. "Oh, don't worry, Anna. I've got plenty of ideas on how to be productive." What I didn't tell her was that I was already thinking far beyond petitions and votes. That night, back at my desk, I started digging deeper. I pulled up the original plat maps for Maplewood Heights from the county's website. Years in construction taught me how to read development plans like a second language. That's when I noticed something strange. The rear corner of my property didn't fall neatly under the HOA's jurisdiction lines. It was part of a grandfathered parcel from an earlier subdivision, technically zoned differently. My heart raced as I double-checked the details. Could it be that Anna's reach didn't extend as far as she thought? The next morning, I called Marcus, an old friend who worked in the city planning department. Over coffee at a diner, I slid the map across the table. "Tell me what you see," I said. Marcus studied it, then looked up with a grin. "You're right. That section of your backyard is zoned residential recreational. It predates the HOA's authority. You could put a sports court, a playground, even a swimming pool back there as long as you have city permits." A laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. "So, you're telling me I could build a pool without Anna's approval?" "Not just a pool," Marcus said. "Anything that qualifies as recreational, it's your land. The HOA can't touch it." That single sentence flipped a switch in my mind. All the rage, all the humiliation, all the nights my kids had gone to bed asking why they weren't welcome at their own pool. Suddenly, it had somewhere to go. If Anna Lynch thought she could bar me family from the community pool, fine. I'd build something better. Not just for my kids, but for every family she had trampled under her rules. I grabbed a napkin from the diner counter and started sketching. My hands moved on instinct like they always did when inspiration struck. A splash pad for the younger kids, a modest slide that emptied into a landing pool, a waterfall feature for atmosphere, shaded seating for parents, safety fencing to exceed city requirements, and maybe, just maybe, a name that would sting every time Anna heard it. By the time I finished my coffee, the words "Project Splashback" were scrolled across the napkin in bold letters. I knew the road wouldn't be easy. Permits needed filing, equipment had to be sourced, crews had to be organized. But for the first time, since Anna had marched into Maplewood Heights with her binder of rules, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't about fighting her on her terms anymore. This was about rewriting the rules of the game. That night, I called Carlos and Maria. I'm not just talking petitions anymore, I told them. I'm building something Anna can't control. And when it's done, every family in this neighborhood will have a place to swim. Carlos let out a low whistle. You're serious, aren't you? Dead serious, I said. She wanted to push us out. Fine. We'll make our own way back in, and we'll do it bigger. Maria chuckled, but there was steel in her voice. If you pull this off, Nolan, you won't just be building a water park. You'll be building a community again. ASI hung up the phone. I could already picture it. The laughter of kids echoing from my backyard. The splash of water jets. The cheers as little ones raced down slides. And across the street, Anna Lynch fuming in her lounge chair, powerless to stop it. For the first time all summer, I went to bed smiling. Because if Anna thought she'd won, she was about to learn what happens when you push a builder too far. When I woke up the next morning, the vision of Project Splashback was still seared into my mind. I rolled out of bed before Mia and the kids stirred, grabbed a tape measure, and stepped into the backyard. The air was damp from last night's rain, and the grass clung to my boots as I walked toward the far corner of the lot. The very corner Marcus had confirmed was outside Anna's iron grip. I paced out mentally, carving the space into zones. Slide here, splash pad there, shaded benches along the fence line. My mind spun like it did whenever I was managing a job site. Only this time, the project wasn't for a developer or a client. This was for my family and every neighbor who'd been pushed aside by Anna's ridiculous reign. The more I walked the space, the more excited I became. My kids had been robbed of their summer, but now maybe I could give them something even better than the HOA pool. No lifeguards glaring, no whistles blowing at laughter. No clipboard warriors tallying imaginary violations, just freedom and water. Lots of water. After breakfast, I broke the news to Mia. She was skeptical at first. Nolan, this sounds expensive. And what if the HOA tries to stop you? I grinned, sliding the plat map across the table. They can't. This section isn't under their jurisdiction. I checked with Marcus. As long as I pull the right city permits, we're bulletproof. She studied the map, then looked at me. And you really think you can build a whole water park back here? I laughed. Mia, I've built half the office parks in this county. A water park? That's child's play. By lunch, I was on the phone with Marcus again, this time filling out the official paperwork for a residential recreational water feature. The process usually took weeks, but Marcus promised he'd expedite it. I've seen what that woman's been pulling, he said. If anyone deserves a break, it's you. With permits in motion, I turned to design. I dusted off my old drafting table in the garage, spread out clean sheets of graph paper, and sketched until my pencil wore down. I wanted the place to be safe, but also thrilling. I envisioned a compact splash pad with water jets that could shoot streams into the air for the little ones. Beside it, a modest slide with a gentle curve feeding into a catch pool, deep enough for fun, but shallow enough for safety. A rock-style waterfall feature would anchor the corner, doubling as eye candy and white noise to drown out any echoes of HOA nonsense. Around it all, a sturdy fence with a lockable gate built higher than the minimum safety code required. But I wasn't stopping there. If this was going to be a true rebellion against Anna's tyranny, it had to shine. I planned shade sails for the parents' benches with cup holders and solar heating panels to keep the water at a comfortable temperature. I even sketched a small cabana for changing and storing towels. The kind of thing that said, this isn't just a pool. It's an experience. That evening, I gathered my kids in the living room and showed them the sketches. Their jaws dropped. Wait, this is going to be in our backyard, Jason asked, eyes wide. Emma clapped her hands. Can we invite our friends? Liam bounced up and down like a pogo stick. I want the slide. Dad, can I go first on the slide? Their excitement was like rocket fuel. For weeks they'd been dragged down by Anna's oppressive rules. Now they were glowing again, buzzing with hope. That was all I needed. The next step was sourcing. I called old contacts from my construction days, guys who owed me favors, or remembered the times I'd helped them out on tight deadlines. One by one, they came through. A supplier in Richmond offered me a discount on water pumps. A concrete crew in Maple County agreed to work overtime shifts. A landscaper buddy promised to donate extra sod and decorative plants once the main work was done. The project wasn't just taking shape, it was gaining momentum. Of course, word got out fast. In neighborhoods like ours, gossip traveled quicker than the mail. By day 3 of site prep, I caught 3 mothers walking their strollers past my yard, slowing down to peek at the action. One of them called out, "What's going on back there, Nolan?" I smiled, wiping sweat from my brow. You'll see soon enough. Let's just say your kids might have a new favorite hangout. By day 5, the sound of jackhammers and backhoes echoed across Maplewood Heights. Excavation crews dug deep into the corner lot, preparing the foundation for the splash pad and pool. My kids sat in lawn chairs sipping lemonade, cheering like it was their personal halftime show. But not everyone was impressed. On the 3rd evening of construction, I looked up from the plans to see Anna Lynch herself striding down the sidewalk, flanked by 2 board members. Clipboard in hand, she looked like a hawk circling prey. This construction has not been approved by the Architectural Review Committee, she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I wiped my hands on my jeans and grinned. Evening, Anna. Funny thing, you don't have any authority over this part of my property. I handed her a copy of the Platte City permit and zoning documents I'd prepared in advance. It's all legal, all permitted, out of your jurisdiction. She flipped through the papers, her face weening with every page. This is clearly an attempt to circumvent HOA authority. You're welcome to call your lawyer, I said, keeping my tone calm. Mine's already on standby. And just so you know, any attempt to interfere might count as harassment. Hiri's narrowed into slits. For a moment, I thought she might explode right there on the sidewalk. Instead, she snapped the folder shut and hissed, "We'll see about this." Then she turned on her heel and stormed off, her board members trailing behind. I couldn't help but laugh as I watched her go. For once, the Queen of Maplewood Heights had been knocked off her throne. The next morning, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. A cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney. I handed it to my own lawyer, who responded within hours. My client's project is fully compliant with city zoning and permits. Further attempts at interference will be considered harassment and subject to legal action. With that, the noise from the HOA went quiet for now. Construction roared on. Concrete was poured and cured. Plumbing lines were fitted and pressure tested. The pumps arrived on schedule, sleek and efficient, ready to recycle thousands of gallons with ease. Safety fences went up around the perimeter higher than code with lockable latches. By the 2nd week, the structures were standing tall. And even from the sidewalk, curious families could see something magical taking shape. My backyard was becoming the one place in Maplewood Heights where kids could actually be kids. And Anna Lynch could do nothing but watch. The sun was beating down on my backyard and the air was thick with the smell of wet cement. By the start of the 3rd week, Project Splashback had gone from sketches on a napkin to a living, breathing construction site. Crews in hard hats moved like ants welding joints, laying pipe-tightening bolts. The sharp clang of rebar, the hiss of power saws cutting through PVC, the rumble of cement trucks. These were the sounds of my rebellion. My neighbors, curious at first, had now become daily spectators. Parents wheeled strollers up the sidewalk just to watch the progress. Kids peered through the fence wide-eyed, and even the local mailman lingered an extra minute each day, trying to sneak a peek at the transformation. From the start, I knew this project had to be more than a slapdash pool. It had to be professional, safe, and impossible to attack legally. I overbuilt everything. If code said the fence needed to be 4T, I built it 6. If the law required 2 drains, I installed 4. The pump system wasn't just efficient. It was hospital-grade, capable of filtering water twice as fast as most community pools. I invested in anti-slip surfaces for the splash pad, shatterproof lighting, and shade structures bolted down to withstand storms. Every corner of the build screamed, "Try to fight this and you'll lose." And of course, Anna tried. On the 4th day of concrete work, she returned. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 HOA board members flanked her, one with a camera pointed directly at my yard. Anna's heels clicked on the sidewalk like gunshots as she marched toward me. "Stop this immediately," she barked, pointing a manicured finger at the excavated pool. "This project has not been sanctioned by the HOA. You're in violation of community." aesthetics, and will be fine daily until this nonsense ceases. I didn't even look up from the blueprint in my hands. Good morning, Anna. Careful with those shoes. Cement dust ruins leather. She scowled, snapping her fingers at the man with the camera. Document everything. This will be evidence. I finally looked up and handed her a manila folder. Here, plat zoning approval and city permits stamped and signed. The HOA has no jurisdiction over this section of my property. And for their court, your friend with the camera is trespassing. Step onto my lawn and I'll call the police. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Anna's jaw tightened as she flipped through the papers. She hated that I was right. With a huff, she shoved the folder back at me and snapped. This isn't over. She was half right. It wasn't over, but not in the way she imagined. The very next morning, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney. I barely skimmed it before sending a copy to my lawyer, Evan Marks. Evan had the kind of voice that could charm a snake and the brain of a chess master. Within hours, he fired off a response that made me chuckle out loud. My client's project is fully compliant with city zoning. Any further attempts to interfere will be documented as harassment. Kindly direct future correspondence to my office. With Evan in my corner, the HOA's threats fizzled. They knew they couldn't touch me legally, so Anna resorted to theatrics. 2 days later, I noticed a strange car parked across the street, a county health inspector's van. My stomach clenched at first, but when the inspector stepped onto my property, he was all smiles. Routine check, he said, clipboard in hand. He walked the site, testing water samples, examining plumbing, double-checking the safety fencing. After an hour, he handed me his report, full compliance. Not only that, but he complimented the water quality system I'd chosen. Cleaner than most city pools, he said with a grin. When the inspector left, I looked across the street. Anna was standing there, arms crossed, seething. She had sent the inspector, hoping to shut me down. Instead, she'd handed me a glowing endorsement. Word spread faster than wildfire. Families whispered excitedly in the cul-de-sac, kids tugged at their parents' sleeves, begging to know when the backyard water park would open. By the end of the second week, people I barely knew were approaching me at the grocery store. "Nolan, I heard you're building something incredible," one mother said. "If you ever need volunteers, count us in." And while Miley's grew, so did Anna's paranoia. She doubled down on HOA patrols, stationing her friends like prison guards at the community pool. Families who dared to laugh too loudly were warned. Kids who splashed were threatened with suspension. It was as though she thought doubling her iron grip would stop the tide rising against her. She couldn't see. It was only making her look more ridiculous. By the third week, construction was ahead of schedule. The splash pad was fully installed, jets ready to launch arcs of water into the air. The slide gleamed under the sun, its curve smooth and inviting. The waterfall feature trickled into the catch pool, even before the pump system was fully activated. I tested the solar panels on the roof of the cabana, smiling when the heating gauge ticked upward. That Friday night, I sat in a lawn chair at the edge of the nearly finished park. The work lights buzzed, casting long shadows across the cement. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine it. The laughter, the squeals, the splashing, my kids running free, their joy, unpoliced by whistle-wielding lifeguards or rule-happy retirees. My vision was so clear it felt almost real. The very next morning, it became realer than I ever expected. At 8:00 a.m., while crews were pouring the last section of concrete, a line of neighbors formed on the sidewalk. Parents holding coffee mugs, kids clutching soccer balls, teenagers craning their necks to see over the fence. They weren't just curious anymore. They were invested. Carlos Rodriguez stepped forward. "We heard you're calling this thing Project Splashback. When's the grand opening?" I laughed, wiping my brow. 2 weeks if all goes to plan." The crowd erupted in cheers, kids jumping up and down, parents nodding with satisfaction. And standing at the edge of the street, arms crossed, was Anna Lynch. Her face was red, her jaw clenched, her hands balled into fists. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She wasn't just losing control, she was watching her kingdom crumble. That night, after the crews left, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat on the porch with Mia. The air was warm, cicadas buzzing in the distance. She leaned against me, her voice soft. "You know, you're not just building a water park. You're building something bigger." I looked at her puzzled. She smiled. "You're building community." Something Anna could never understand. I stared out at the construction site, the floodlights casting a glow over the fresh cement. She was right. Anna thought she had ended our summer, but all she had done was light the spark for something greater, something she couldn't control. Project Splashback wasn't just a pool. It was a statement, and very soon, it would be open for business. The morning the last section of landscaping went in, I stood back, hands on my hips, and felt a pride I hadn't tasted in years. The yard that had once been just a sloping patch of grass was now alive with color and motion. The splash pad gleamed its water jets, already synchronized to shoot arcs like playful fountains. The slide curled gracefully into the pool. The waterfall cascaded with a steady murmur, and the shade structures billowed gently in the summer breeze. Even the cabana smelled fresh with new wood and paint. But it wasn't until my kids stepped into the space for the first time that I knew I'd done something special. Jason ran straight for the slide. Emma shrieked with delight under the splash jets, and Liam jumped into the shallow catch pool with a cannonball so loud I thought the neighbors might cheer. Their laughter was unfiltered, their joy unrestrained. No whistles, no fines, no honor, just freedom. I didn't keep it to myself for long. The very next week, invitations went out. Not formal cardstock, but printed flyers that Mia and the kids helped slip into mailboxes. At the top, bold letters read, "The Maple Splash Club Grand Opening." Below that, families welcome. Free membership. Bring your kids. Bring your laughter. No HOA board members allowed. When Mia read the last line aloud, she burst out laughing. That's going to drive Anna insane. That's the point, I said, grinning. Saturday arrived with a heat wave that sent temperatures soaring toward 98°. By noon, cars were lining the street outside my house. Families filed through the side gate, kids clutching towels and goggles, parents balancing coolers and lawn chairs. I set up a simple check-in table at the entrance with a stack of liability waivers. Nothing complicated, just standard language I'd printed from a template Evan, my lawyer, provided. Each family signed, each child received a laminated membership card with Maple Splash Club printed across the top. You would have thought I'd handed them golden tickets. The kids held those cards like they were badges of honor. By one allows, my backyard was transformed into something out of a summer festival. Kids darted between the splash pad and the slide, shrieking with delight as water sprayed around them. Parents lounged in the shaded seating, chatting, swapping snacks, laughing in a way I hadn't seen since before Anna's reign. Maria Chen set up a table of homemade dumplings. Carlos Rodriguez fired up a portable grill for hot dogs. And within an hour, the place smelled like a block party. "This is amazing," Carlos said, handing me a paper plate stacked with food. "My kids haven't smiled like this all summer." Maria, balancing a cup of iced tea, nodded. "This is what community should feel like, not whatever circus Anna is running." I looked around, the sound of laughter washing over me, and realized Maria was right. This wasn't just rebellion. It was reclamation. We were taking back the spirit Anna had stolen. But not everyone was celebrating. Across the street, the HOA pool sat nearly empty. The only figures in sight were Anna and her loyalists, perched stiffly in their lounge chairs, glaring across the road like statues. They had no music, no food, no laughter, just a barren stretch of water reflecting their sour expressions. At one point I caught Anna's eyes. She raised her wineglass toward me in a mocking salute, then turned her back. But I didn't need her approval. I had the approval of 20 families splashing in my backyard, and that was worth more than every vote she'd ever stolen. As the day went on, the club took on a life of its own. Parents offered to contribute supplies for future weekends, snacks, folding chairs, even a shade umbrella someone had stored in their garage. Kids began making plans for next time, already treating the Maple Splash Club like a permanent fixture of their lives. It was Carlos who first suggested we formalize it. "Look," he said between bites of a burger, "if you want this to last, we should make it official. Not complicated, just a club charter. Private property, private membership. That way, if Anna tries to pull some legal stunt, you've got everything covered." I thought about it, then nodded. "You're right. If she can twist the HOA bylaws, she'll try the same here. Let's make this airtight." That night, after the last family left and my kids fell asleep, exhausted but smiling, I sat down at the dining room table with Evan on speakerphone. We drafted a simple charter. The Maple Splash Club is a private nonprofit club hosted on the property of Nolan and Mia Owen. Membership is free and limited to Maplewood Heights. Families with children under 18, HOA board members are excluded to prevent conflicts of interest. When I read that last line aloud, Evan chuckled. "That's going to sting, but it's perfectly legal. As long as you're consistent, you can set the membership criteria however you want." And we were consistent. The following weekend, families lined up again, waivers signed, cards handed out. Each kid proudly clipped their Maple Splash Club card to their swim bag like a badge of rebellion. But with each success, Anna's fury grew. The first shot she fired came in the form of another letter. This one claiming my club violated community harmony rules, and that all neighborhood gatherings must be approved by the HOA. Evan fired back immediately. "Private property, private club. Your board has no jurisdiction here." Her second attempt was sneakier. She filed a complaint with the city claiming I was running a commercial water park in a residential zone. The inspector showed up clipboard in hand, looking skeptical. But when he walked through, all he saw were families enjoying themselves. No money changing hands, no tickets, no cash box. He closed his notebook with a sigh. Looks like you're just having fun with friends. Nothing illegal here. When the inspector left, I caught sight of Anna standing down the street, her phone still in her hand. The look on her face was priceless. She had swung twice and missed both times. But the most audacious move came 2 weeks later. One afternoon, I was manning the check-in table when Anna herself strolled up oversized sunglasses, shielding her eyes. "I'd like to join," she said coolly, sliding the waiver across the table. "I have every right to enjoy this facility as a resident of Maplewood Heights." I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. "Sorry, Anna, read the charter. HOA board members are excluded." Her lips thinned. "That's discrimination," I smiled. "No, that's membership criteria. This is a private club on private property. My lawyer assures me it's perfectly legal." Her face turned crimson. For a moment, I thought she might snatch the clipboard and rip it in half. Instead, she spun on her heel and stormed off her heels, clacking against the pavement like gunshots. When she was gone, Carlos leaned over laughing. "She actually tried to join. That's rich." "Oh, she'll be back," I said, shaking my head. "But every time she tries, she just proves our point. This isn't about rules, it's about control, and she's losing it." That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Emma looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are we really going to keep the Splash Club forever?" I smiled, brushing hair from her forehead. "As long as you want it, kiddo. This club is yours." And as I turned off the light and closed her door, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just a summer project anymore. This was a legacy, a statement, a fortress of joy in the middle of Anna's empire of control. And the best part, it was only the beginning. If Anna Lynch was rattled before the Maple Splash Club's second month pushed her straight into desperation, she had gone from smug queen of the HOA pool to a figure huddled under her umbrella watching her kingdom empty, while laughter and music spilled from my backyard. And like any ruler losing power, she decided the only way to regain control was to wage war. Her first strike was pure theater. One evening, envelopes stamped with the HOA seal landed in dozens of mailboxes. The letter claimed that unauthorized recreational facilities threatened the visual harmony and property values of Maplewood Heights. It went on to propose a new regulation banning structures with moving water features within the community. The kicker: the vote required a 2/3 majority of homeowners to pass. By then, more than half the families had already attended a Splash Club gathering. They'd watched their kids smile for the first time in weeks, eaten Maria Chen's dumplings, and sipped Carlos Rodriguez's grilled corn lemonade concoction, while their toddlers ran wild in the splash pad. When the HOA vote came, Anna's motion flopped spectacularly. Not even close. She managed to scrape together a third of the community, the same retirees who clapped at every rule she invented, but everyone else saw through her. Her second strike was sneakier. A week later, I got a notice taped to my door. HOA fine issued for excessive noise and nuisance activity. I laughed out loud when I read it. They were finding me for my own backyard. The problem: the Maple Splash Club wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. I called Evan, my lawyer, who chuckled as he drafted his response. "The HOA has no authority over my client's property. Further attempts to find him will be documented as harassment. Consider this your final warning." Anna didn't back down. She doubled her patrols, dispatching her clipboard warriors to the sidewalks bordering my home. They stood like sentries, scowling at families arriving with towels and floaties, writing notes in their little pads as if they were FBI agents. My members laughed it off, waving cheerfully as they walked by, which only seemed to make Anna angrier. But she wasn't finished. No, her third move was her boldest yet. Late one Friday afternoon, as kids shrieked down the slide, and parents lounged in the shade, a white sedan rolled up. Out stepped 2 city code enforcement officers. They walked briskly to my gate, clipboards and hand-eyes scanning the water features. Anna trailed behind them, wearing a grin so wide it could split her face in two. "This is it," she hissed loudly enough for nearby families to hear. "Your little illegal water park is finished." The officers introduced themselves politely, then asked to inspect the property. I welcomed them in, confident in my preparation. They checked the pumps, examined the drainage system, tested chlorine levels, and measured the fence height. Kids splashed around their boots, giggling as the officers scribbled notes. After half an hour, the lead inspector closed his folder. "Mr. Owen," he said, "your facility exceeds code in every way. Frankly, it's safer than most public pools we've inspected this year." Parents erupted in applause. Kids cheered. Anna's grin collapsed into a snarl, but she stammered. "You can't just let this circus operate in a residential neighborhood." The inspector turned to her. "Ma'am, this is a private recreational facility on private land. We have no jurisdiction to shut it down. In fact, I wish more neighborhoods had setups this safe." Anna's face burned crimson. She spun on her heel and stormed off her heels, stabbing the sidewalk like daggers. That night, after the crowd thinned, Carlos approached me with a conspiratorial grin. "You'll want to see this," he said, holding up his phone. It was an email, or rather a series of them. Somehow, don't ask me how Carlos had connections, a string of HOA board emails had leaked. In them, Anna outlined a preferred residence list, a roster of her allies who would be quietly exempted from the stricter pool rules. Worse, one email showed she had rented out the HOA pool to a private event company for a wedding reception, pocketing a tidy profit, while families were told the pool was closed for maintenance. My jaw clenched as I scrolled. This wasn't just hypocrisy, it was corruption. "We need to share this," Maria said firmly. At the next HOA meeting we did, 30 parents packed the community center waving printed copies of the leaked emails. I took the floor. "Anna Lynch has claimed this is about order, about safety," I said, holding up the papers. "But while our kids were banned for laughing too loudly, she was hosting private parties at the community pool. While we paid $425 a month, she created a secret list of favored residents who never had to follow her rules. This isn't leadership. This is abuse." The room exploded. Parents shouted. Even some of Anna's staunchest supporters sat stunned, betrayal etched on their faces. Anna tried to give the meeting back to order, but the noise drowned her out. Finally, she slammed her binder shut and stormed out the door, slamming behind her like a gunshot. But the damage was done. The emails spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Screenshots were forwarded, printed, tacked to bulletin boards. Anna's credibility shattered overnight. Back at the Splash Club, the fallout was immediate. Families who'd once been hesitant now flocked to join. We had more than 50 children with laminated club cards by the end of the week. Parents brought foldable tables, donated coolers, even organized a rotating snack schedule. It was no longer just my project. It was the community's. I stood at the edge of the splash pad one evening, watching the sunset cast golden light across the water jets. Emma and Liam danced under the fountains. Jason raced his friends down the slide, and parents sat laughing, plates piled high from a potluck spread. It looked less like a backyard and more like a festival. "This is bigger than you now," Mia whispered beside me. I nodded slowly. She was right. I had started Project Splashback as revenge, a middle finger to Anna's tyranny. But somewhere along the way, it had transformed into something else. Something Anna could never control. A genuine community stronger than any HOA rulebook. Of course, Anna wasn't finished. People like her never quit quietly. The very next day, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox. A lawsuit notice. The HOA, under Anna's leadership, was suing me for operating a discriminatory club. Her argument: by excluding board members from membership, I was guilty of the very thing I accused her of. I laughed as I read it, but deep down I knew this was serious. Lawsuits meant time, money, and stress. She was trying to drag me into a legal quagmire, betting that the cost alone would break me. I called Evan immediately. He skimmed the document and snorted. "This is pathetic. They don't have a leg to stand on. A private club and private property can set its own criteria. This is just harassment in a new form." But still, I couldn't shake the feeling Anna was wounded, cornered, and dangerous. And a cornered queen is often the most reckless of all. The war for Maplewood Heights wasn't over. It was about to enter its ugliest phase. By midsummer, the battle lines in Maplewood Heights were no longer subtle. On one side was the Maple Splash Club, our backyard rebellion that had blossomed into a sanctuary of laughter and community. On the other was Anna Lynch, clinging desperately to the shards of her authority, using every tool at her disposal to punish us for daring to live without her permission. The lawsuit she filed against me turned out to be more bark than bite. Evan, my attorney, dismantled it in weeks, filing counterclaims that painted the HOA's behavior as harassment. The board's funds drained quickly after all legal fees don't pay themselves, and the HOA treasury wasn't bottomless. Homeowners began asking uncomfortable questions. Why are our dues being wasted on lawsuits against families instead of maintaining the pool? At the July board meeting, the tension was palpable. Parents packed the room, arms crossed, while Anna sat at the front table, binder open like ash shield. The treasurer cleared his throat nervously before delivering the bad news. "Our legal expenditures have exceeded the quarterly budget by 30%, he said, his eyes flicking toward Anna. "And with declining pool usage, maintenance costs are eating into reserves. If this continues, we may need to raise fees." The room erupted. One father shouted, "We're paying $425 a month already for a pool our kids can't use, and now you want more?" Another mother raised her hand. "Why should we pay for Anna's lawsuits when she's the one who created this mess?" Anna banged her gavel furiously. "Order. This is about community standards. We must preserve property values in harmony. But her words rang hollow. The more she shouted, the more people saw the truth. She wasn't defending the community. She was defending herself. Then came the breaking point. 2 days after that meeting, a thunderstorm rolled across Maplewood Heights, the kind that cracks the sky open with lightning and pounds the ground with sheets of rain. By dawn, the HOA pool was a disaster. The aging drainage system had ruptured under the pressure, flooding the deck and shorting out the pump motors. By mid-morning, the water was murky, filled with debris, and unsafe for use. Anna called an emergency meeting demanding immediate repairs. But the board's coffers were already drained from her legal crusade. The quotes for fixing the pool, tens of thousands of dollars, were impossible to swallow. Families looked at one another. Realization dawning their expensive HOA fees had bought them nothing but a broken pool and a stack of legal bills. That afternoon, Carlos knocked on my door. Behind him stood a small group of neighbors soaked from inspecting the pool. "Nolan," he said, his voice urgent, "we need your help. The HOA pool is shut down, and if it doesn't reopen soon, the whole community loses." I blinked. "You're asking me to fix the same pool?" Anna banned my family from Maria stepped forward. "Not for her, for us. For the kids. You're the only one with these skills to pull this off." I glanced past them toward my backyard where kids were splashing in clean, sparkling water under the afternoon sundae. It felt ironic, almost poetic. Anna had tried to shut me down and now her empire was collapsing. Mia touched my arm. "Do it," she whispered. "Show them who really builds community here." So I did. That evening, I walked to the pool with my tool belt slung over my shoulder, flanked by volunteers carrying buckets, hoses, and toolboxes. We looked less like rebels and more like a rescue crew. Parents swept debris from the deck. Teenagers scooped out leaves, and I crawled into the pump room with a flashlight tracing wires and pipes. The damage was worse than expected, but not beyond repair. With some salvaged parts, temporary wiring, and a replacement pump I sourced through an old supplier, we had the system running again within 72 hours. When the pumps whirred to life and clean, water began circulating. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Kids clapped, parents hugged, and for the first time in weeks, the community pool sparkled like it had before Anna's reign. I stood on the deck covered in sweat and grime and felt something shift in the air. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. I hadn't just built Project Splashback. I'd proven that when the HOA failed, the community itself could rise. Of course, Anna couldn't stand it. At the next board meeting, she tried to spin the story. "Mr. Owen's actions were unauthorized and reckless," she declared. "He endangered everyone by tampering with HOA property." But this time, the room wasn't buying it. Parents booed. One elderly man stood up and shouted, "If it weren't for Nolan, that pool would still be a swamp." Carlos seized the moment. He rose to his feet, papers in hand. "This board no longer represents the interests of Maplewood Heights. I move for a special election to recall the current leadership and replace them with members who will." The motion passed in landslide. The election date was set for mid-August. Turnout shattered records. Nearly 80% of homeowners cast their votes, and when the results were tallied, Anna and her loyalists were swept out. Carlos was elected president. Maria took over amenities and 2 other parents joined them to form a new family-centered board. The celebration afterward was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Families poured into the splash club and the HOA pool alike, kids darting back and forth between the 2 parents, raising toasts of lemonade and iced tea. Fireworks lit up the sky, their reflection dancing in the water. And in the middle of it all, Anna sat alone on a pool chair binder clasped to her chest like a life raft. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. When the final vote results were read aloud, she stood silently, then left without a word. Later, as the night wound down, Carlos approached me. "We want you to join the new board, Nolan," he said. "Help us redesign the HOA pool. Incorporate some of the features you've pioneered here. The community deserves the best of both worlds." I glanced toward my backyard, where the waterfall glistened in the moonlight, then back at the sparkling community pool we had just revived. "I'll help," I said. "But not as a politician. As a builder, that's who I am." Carlos smiled. "That's all we need." That night, lying in bed beside Mia, I thought about how far we'd come. Anna had tried to banish us, to humiliate us, to crush us under the weight of her rules. Instead, she'd created the very movement that dethroned her. And in saving the HOA pool, the very symbol of her control, I had shown the community that real power doesn't come from binders or clipboards. It comes from action, from people willing to get their hands dirty for something bigger than themselves. But the story wasn't finished yet, because Anna still lived across the street watching everything unravel. And I had the feeling she wasn't leaving Maplewood Heights without one final move. The days following the recall election felt like a new season had dawned in Maplewood Heights. The atmosphere shifted almost overnight. Gone were the tense whispers about HOA patrols and clipboard spies. Instead, neighbors greeted each other at the mailboxes again. Kids rode bikes in clusters without fear of reprimand. And laughter once again filled the sidewalks. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt alive. But not everyone embraced the change. From my front porch, I often caught glimpses of Anna Lynch. She no longer strutted in power suits with her binder clutched to her chest. Now she lingered, on the edge of sidewalks, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her expression. Sometimes she stood across the street from my yard, staring at the splash pad as if it were a monument built to spite her. Other times, she'd sit by the near-empty HOA pool sipping wine while children splashed freely under the new relaxed rules she once outlawed. The sight of their joy must have burned her worse than the August Sunday Carlos and Maria wasted no time after taking office. Their first order of business was to repeal nearly every draconian rule Anna had forced through. Adult-only swim hours were abolished. Toys were allowed again. And laughter, yes, actual laughter, was no longer a finable offense. Then they approached me with a proposal. "We want to make the community pool a true centerpiece again," Carlos explained one evening over iced tea on my porch. "Would you be willing to lend your expertise? Maybe help us incorporate some features from the Splash Club?" The offer humbled me. I hadn't built Project Splashback to win influence or prestige. I'd built it to give my kids and every other child in Maplewood Heights the summer they deserved. Still, the thought of blending the spirit of the Splash Club into the HOA pool felt poetic, almost like turning a battlefield into a park. So I agreed. For the next month, I worked side by side with the new board. We installed a smaller splash pad at the HOA pool, built shaded seating modeled after mine, and added a rock feature that doubled as a waterfall. Parents, volunteered teenagers pitched in for community service hours, and slowly the HOA pool became less a symbol of Anna's tyranny and more a gathering place again. On the day the renovations finished, we held a water unity day where families bounced between my backyard and the HOA pool, celebrating both spaces in harmony. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. What began as a ban on my children had birthed not one but two thriving water havens. Anna, however, remained silent. She skipped meetings, ignored neighbors, and rarely left her house except to glare at me from afar. Then one afternoon in late September, a Pharrell sign appeared on her pristine lawn. Word spread quickly Anna was leaving Maplewood Heights. Rumors flew that she had bought a home in a 55 and older community in Florida, where children would never disturb her peace again. The night before the moving truck arrived, I found her standing at the edge of my fence. The Splash Club had been drained for the season, its fountains dry, its slide gleaming in the pale light. Anna's silhouette was rigid, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair, her face unreadable. For a long moment we just looked at each other across the fence. I considered walking over, extending a hand, maybe even offering a truce. But then I remembered Emma's tears, Jason's humiliation, Liam's confusion. I remembered the fines, the warnings, the way Anna had sneered as she tried to strip us of joy. So, I simply nodded. She nodded back, and then she turned and walked away without a word. The next morning, the moving truck rumbled down the street. By noon, Anna was gone. Just like that, the storm that had hung over Maplewood Heights all summer had finally passed. Life didn't return to what it was before it became something better. The Maple Splash Club continued not as an act of rebellion, but as a community tradition. Families rotated hosting duties, bringing food, planning events, even organizing birthday parties. Meanwhile, the show pool thrived under the new leadership, its usage higher than ever. One Saturday afternoon, as I watched my children dart between the two pools, laughing, playing their voices, mixing with dozens of others, I realized something profound. Anna thought she had punished us by taking away access. Instead, she had forced us to create something greater. She had unwittingly built a stronger, closer, more joyful community than Maplewood Heights had ever known. That evening, as the sun dipped low and parents packed up coolers, I leaned back in my chair and reflected. Sometimes life knocks you down, strips away what you thought you couldn't live without. And in those moments, you have two choices: surrender to bitterness or build something better. I chose to build. And in doing so, I learned Allison more valuable than any victory over Anna Lynch. Community isn't built on rules, fines, or binders. It's built in laughter echoing across a yard on neighbors, sharing food on children, splashing until sunset. Real power doesn't come from control. It comes from connection. So, if you've ever felt crushed by someone who seemed untouchable, remember this. Their power only exists as long as you give it to them. Take it back. Build your own wave. Change the tide. And who knows, you might just end up with a water park in your backyard.